Loneliness doesn't announce itself with trumpets or a crash of thunder. It seeps into you slowly, like water finding cracks in a wall. My marriage had become a quiet prison, no shouting matches, no dramatic fights, just silence. My wife was there, physically, but her touch, her warmth, her laughter, all the things that once kept me alive, had evaporated. We became roommates sharing bills, not lovers sharing a life. I often sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, nursing a drink I didn't need, staring at the door as though someone, anyone, would walk through it and rescue me from the suffocating stillness. Nights were the worst. I'd hear her moving in the bedroom, sometimes humming to herself, and yet she never reached for me. I stopped asking why. Pride can be a cruel companion. That night, I was alone again. The rain tapped gently against the windows, the kind of rain that makes the world outside blur like an unfinished painting. I had convinced myself that this would be my life forever, a man trapped in his own home, slowly dissolving into silence. And then, I heard the knock. It wasn't loud, not urgent. Just a soft, deliberate knock, like someone asking permission to disturb the dead. I froze, heart hammering. At that hour, no one should have been at my door. I walked toward it slowly, almost afraid that opening it might change something forever. When I turned the handle and pulled it open, the air shifted. He stood there, half drenched from the rain, his eyes searching mine as though he knew something about me that even I hadn't admitted. I should have asked what he wanted. I should have closed the door. But instead, I stepped aside, and he entered my life with the quiet certainty of a storm. That was the night the silence broke. That was the night temptation walked into my home. He said his name casually, as if it didn't matter whether I remembered it or not. But I did. I remembered the curve of his lips when he said it, the way his eyes scanned the room like he could see through the layers of my carefully constructed life. He had an ease about him, the kind of confidence that makes you feel exposed even when you're fully clothed. We talked at first, harmless words, small talk about the rain, the late hour, why he was there. He said he'd stopped by because he knew I'd be awake. I didn't ask how he knew. Maybe I didn't want to know. What struck me wasn't his presence but how quickly the air around him thickened with possibility. It started with looks, brief, lingering, charged. I caught myself staring at his hands as he gestured, the veins beneath his skin like lines of a map I suddenly wanted to follow. When his knee brushed mine by accident, I didn't move away. That single touch lit something inside me I had thought long dead. I told myself it was wrong. I told myself I was married, that I should never even allow such thoughts. But loneliness speaks louder than vows when it festers long enough. And when he leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my ear, asking if I was happy, my silence gave him all the answers he needed. He didn't press further that night. He left with a smile that promised more, and as the door closed behind him, I realized I was trembling, not from fear but from anticipation. For the first time in years, I felt alive. It didn't take long. A few more visits, a few more conversations that drifted too close to the edge. And then, one night, it happened. I remember the way he stood by the door, watching me, as though waiting for permission. I gave it without words, without thought. When his lips finally touched mine, I felt something break inside me, chains snapping, walls crumbling. It wasn't gentle, it was hungry, urgent, the kind of kiss that steals the air from your lungs and replaces it with fire. We stumbled through the house like two men possessed, our bodies colliding with desperation. The guilt whispered at the back of my mind, but it was drowned out by the flood of sensation, his hands, his breath, the weight of his body against mine. For years, I had been starved of intimacy, and suddenly, I was feasting. There was no room for hesitation, no thought of consequences. Only heat, only need. The world outside ceased to exist. My marriage, my responsibilities, my name, none of it mattered in that moment. I was no longer a man trapped in silence. I was alive, burning, consumed. When it was over, I lay there, breathless, my body trembling, my mind a storm of contradictions. I had betrayed my vows, my wife, my old self. But even as shame curled around me, so did something else, satisfaction. For the first time in years, I felt seen, touched, desired. And that was a drug I knew I wouldn't quit easily. Days turned into weeks. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still smiled politely at my wife, still played the role of the quiet, reliable husband. But inside, I was divided, one half performing the routine, the other half burning with the memory of every touch, every kiss that had shaken me to my core. He became my escape. Every time he opened the door to my world, I surrendered. We never spoke of love, never promised forever. It wasn't about that. It was about hunger, about feeding a part of me that had been starving. With him, I wasn't invisible. With him, I was alive. But the guilt lingered like smoke after a fire. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night, listening to my wife breathe beside me, wondering if she knew, if she sensed the betrayal in the way I turned away from her. I told myself she'd never find out. I was careful, we were careful, and yet, every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the duality in my eyes, the husband who never strayed, and the man who craved the shadows. It was a dangerous balance, but one I wasn't willing to give up. People think confession brings freedom. They think unburdening the truth sets you free. But sometimes, confession is just another form of cruelty. What would telling her accomplish? Destroying her world so I could lighten mine? No, that would make me selfish in a way I couldn't justify. So I remain anonymous. I tell my story here, not to excuse myself, but to admit that I was human, flawed, lonely, desperate. I know what I did can never be undone. I know that if she ever found out, it would shatter her. That's why I live with the silence of my secret. He still comes sometimes, though less often now. And every time he opens the door, I feel that same rush, that same pull into a world where I am not invisible. I don't know how long it will last. Maybe one day it will end. Maybe one day I'll stop. But tonight, as I sit here writing this, I know one thing: I was alone, until he opened the door. And part of me will never regret that he did. Disclaimer: this story is a mature-themed fictional narrative created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised. This was not just a story about betrayal, it was about loneliness, silence, and the dangerous choices people make when they feel unseen. The anonymous narrator led us into his hidden world, where a single knock on the door changed everything. He lived between guilt and desire, between loyalty and secrecy, and though his wife never found out, the weight of what he carries will never leave him. Stories like this remind us that infidelity isn't always loud or obvious, sometimes it's silent, hidden, and deeply human. If you found yourself drawn into this confession, make sure to subscribe for more true life stories of love, secrets, and betrayal that will keep you thinking long after the last word. This was just one of many untold secrets hidden behind closed doors. If you were moved, shocked, or intrigued by this true infidelity confession, don't stop here. There are more forbidden love stories, hidden affairs, and shocking betrayals waiting for you. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Remember, every story is a lesson, every secret a truth revealed. Stay with us for more true infidelity stories 2025.